Please. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Journey Through the Eyes, EMDR Podcast. Here at Journey Through the Eyes, this is a podcast that is here to unveil and explore the transformative power of EMDR therapy in a very natural, organic, and real-life way. Our mission here at Journey Through the Eyes is to support both the new and seasoned clinicians with the critical conversations and resources about how to own their EMDR journey, become masterful, confident in the therapy, and also how to build their own private practice. I am one of your hosts. I am Tamera J. Licensed professional counselor and EMDR consultant in training. And I'm so honored to be able to share that. And I have with me my amazing co-host, Miss Kathy Couch.
I am Kathy Couch out here in Twin Falls, Idaho, and want to also add Tamera as a PhD candidate. We always want to say that as well because she's about ready to get that old PhD, girl. And
Come on.
I'm really proud of her, so I always am encouraging her to validate that. I am mom of twins, and also a cheerleader out here in Twin Falls, Idaho. I have my own EMDR private practice. I am certified in grief, death, dying, and bereavement. That's what I do. And I work right now with adults, have some work with children and some volunteer aspects with grief. What else, Tamera? Oh, we'll launch our basic training. I have Rewired 360, which is my therapy training business. And then I own also Willow Creek Counseling, where I provide EMDR intensives to patients out here in Idaho. So then we will be launching our training, basic training out here soon. And we have a host of trainings at Rewired 360 related to grief, documentation, which was just a success, EMDR refresher. So check out our courses. But the most important thing is our guest today. So Tamera, I'm going to turn it back to you to introduce our fabulous guest.
I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited. Just her whole spirit and vibe just speaks just so many beautiful, calming things. And so I'm super excited about meeting and having Miss Bronwyn on the podcast with us today. And let me just share a little bit about her. That first of all, she is a licensed mental health counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has been working with clients, started working with them over 15 years ago. Such a beautiful, beautiful story about her journey in becoming a therapist and understanding the intricacies of complex trauma and how it affects relationships and the way we see ourselves and how we see the world. So I'm so excited about what she's going to bring onto the table. A part of her story is that she married her high school or her college sweetheart and that they've been together, oh my gosh, Bronwyn, 23 years. Beautiful. They have celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary in July this month. Has it passed, Bronwyn, or is it coming?
It did. It passed. It was July 12th.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are celebrating and telling you congratulations to you and your honey. And we are so, so grateful to have you here. And we want to turn the table over onto you and tell us a little bit more about yourself and your love for this work you are doing with EMDR therapy.
Yeah, so it's so nice to be here. Nice to see everybody. So a little bit about how I got to start working with complex trauma. I myself identify or resonate with having complex trauma. And really what complex trauma just means is that there's been repeated traumatic incidents of trauma throughout childhood. And what that ends up doing is creating kind of an umbrella of symptoms. Sometimes someone with complex trauma, before they come into my office, might have many diagnoses. Like they might have a diagnosis of ADHD. Sometimes there also might be a diagnosis of a personality disorder, a mood disorder, anxiety, depression, all kinds of things. And we see a lot of the neural networks when we're thinking about those things that we're trying to clear out with EMDR are often with complex trauma, and I think a lot of EMDR clients, we know something here, right?
Mhm.
In our mind. We know that we should feel lovable. We know that we should feel worthy. We've tried maybe traditional approaches like CBT, and we've tried affirmations. And you look in the mirror and you say, I am loved, I am loved, I am loved. And yet, for whatever reasons in the body, right? We're not feeling loved. And so for me, I had done years of traditional talk therapy personally, and I really didn't feel like it was moving the needle. And I actually was in an Uber coming home from seeing my family, which is always, pretty triggering because that's like kind of the original origin of a lot of my traumas, my childhood. And I was talking to the Uber driver, and it turns out he was a therapist that specialized in complex trauma and EMDR. And he just looked at me and he said, "You know what, Bronwyn, I think you should read this book, Pete Walker's book on complex trauma. It sounds like you might have complex trauma." And I felt that he was right. And then after that, that really started my journey of doing EMDR personally. And then that is what caused me to start doing it professionally.
So, whoa, hold up for just a second. It was a Uber driver that
Who's
brought,
awesome.
and so he was
Yes.
also a therapist. This was his side gig.
Yes.
And is that right there where you're at in Florida? This happened?
Yes, talk about serendipity or being in the flow or hearing what you need to hear in the moment. Can you
He was like a
imagine?
little angel. Holy cow.
Yeah, he was my angel.
Curious about that book. Could you share a little bit about the book?
Yes, so the book, it's Pete Walker's book. He also is a therapist who has complex trauma and treats complex trauma, and it's called CPTSD from surviving to thriving. What's interesting about the book is that I feel like I've had a similar experience with the book as maybe some of my clients had. And it's actually it's so accurate that it's almost painful to read if you have complex trauma. So I think there's many other books out there that might be a little bit easier to read. I'm forgetting the name of my favorite one. It might come back to me, but there's another book that I often recommend that maybe is a little easier to read, but really he just details things like, and I think it's really specific to what we're going to talk about today, compassion and the polyvagal theory. He talks about that inner critic. Do you guys deal with that in your practices?
Well, I mean, personally, yeah, the deal. But yeah, I do that. I'm really an advocate of kind of understanding that concept and applying it to myself and sharing that experience of what it was like for me to do it to myself with the client. I think that is a very, very juicy place. And so I can say, when I introduce the concept, like the inner critic, like for me, this is the example of how it shows up for me, right? And so I think that takes away and deflates some of that fear maybe of doing that, and it gives a relational component. But yes, I am familiar with that, and I think it's really just so important, that compassionate piece.
Tamera, do you work with an inner critic?
I love that conversation, right? Because I mean, the whole thing of where what you brought to the table for us today, first of all, and I want to say yes, but I want to rewind the tape a little bit to go back to that framework of traditional talk therapy, right? For me, in my journey, when I started out, like us all, with traditional talk therapy and doing CBT, and I got introduced, right, to that self-talk concept. And when I was introduced to it, I was introduced to it in the form of you have the inner critic, okay, then you have the inner child, and if you can bring and bridge the gap, gap, that you can create this wise mind type of concept, right? But I love the idea of sharing with my clients how that inner critic really, it's a universal type of voice that we all often hear, and that there's ways that that critic has lots of gifts and purposes. You know what I mean? When we learn to kind of befriend it. And so I'm interested in hearing from you, you know, how do you explore that terrain with your clients, and how do you do beautiful work with that? Yeah.
Yeah, well, something to mention is that with the complex trauma, and something that I work with, is structural dissociation. So with structural dissociation, we're looking at, we have those different parts. So, when we think about internal family system, they believe, everyone has these different parts: the exile, the protector, the firefighter, the manager. And I know a lot of people are very familiar with IFS. I also, though, use structural dissociation, or like ego state work. I love the structural dissociation work of Janina Fisher. And so, what we can kind of see, and how this relates to EMDR, is we can have different memory networks, right? So, say, for example, my grandmother died when I was 6.5 years old. So, I've noticed that I have a different memory network from maybe 0 to 6.5 years old, or there's a different memory network with structural dissociation with like my teenage part. What that means is that perhaps if you have complex trauma, it's a lot more maybe ingrained in your brain, which means it's a lot more ingrained in your body and a lot more ingrained in your behavior, which is what is so wonderful about the EMDR. It allows us, and what I do when I'm working with a client, we start off doing the resources first, right? So, what are the strength base of the teenager? What's the strength base of the middle school part? What's the strength base of the inner child? Maybe we often might also do a college part. What are their strengths? And we say all parts are welcome. I'm not talking about multiple personality, right? This is the same brain, same body, same person. But how can we give these parts who are often stuck in trauma time? How can we strengthen the resources they already have, right? We're doing that with EMDR, and we're doing that with the slow bilateral stimulation. And then when these parts feel very safe and they feel protected and they have the good therapeutic relationship, now we're going into the memory networks of each part. And often, they say if we're able to, we go back to the youngest part first. What in the youngest part is holding on to feeling like I am not loved and lovable? And what I do love is that, right, in cognitive behavioral therapy, we're not really getting into the body. And so when we're using that bilateral stimulation, I really feel like that was the part that's missing for most trauma survivors. They say the issues are in the tissues, but right, it's deep. So then when we're getting into those, whether it's positive or negative, we're planting more of the garden that needs to grow and helping that nourish. And then we're taking the weeds out that haven't been helping us. And we're able then, when we're doing the replasticing, planting new beautiful seeds. And so that idea is that when we're involving the body, we're unsticking things that have been stuck. And then I think when we add the polyvagal theory in, and we add compassion in, when we've been practicing all of that, it's easier to be compassionate to ourselves. It's easier to see the good things. Sometimes, honestly, after all my EMDR, I almost feel like, wow, would someone think that I have an overinflated sense of confidence or worthiness or self-esteem? I'm like, I'm unsure, but I also don't care. Like I was talking to my son today, I was saying, I worked really hard to have these good feelings about myself, and I'm proud of them. And I was in a lot of ick for a very long time, and I'm happy to have, it's almost like a healthy narcissism now, right? We're not over inflated, but we can really feel in the body, wow, I am a great therapist. This is amazing. Instead of feeling that imposter syndrome.
You just said so much right there. I think what I wanted to kind of go back on the journey with for a minute is, when we're first starting, in psychotherapy land and we begin working in trauma and we hear the term dissociation, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not at all skilled to deal with that, right? And so we learn about one of the, I don't know, myths or beliefs is that, if we work with dissociation, that's just for multiple personality disorder. I don't do that. And so when we come into trauma therapy and we hear what you're saying about the parts, and everyone has parts, and the memory networks with the parts, which is the first time I've heard that. That's amazing. It takes away for me some of the distress with working with dissociation. And what you're saying about that skill building, like I am a great therapist. I have these skills now to offer patients or even consultees about how to work with these parts. And it really, what it does is minimizes the distress and they're experiencing and kind of compartmentalizes it into a part versus infecting or contaminating the whole self. And so I think that's so important what you're saying there as we break it down. And I've seen patients really just respond to that so well. And I also wanted to say, you talked some about CBT and the firefighter part and that, what was that word you said, negative self? You asked us that question. What was that called?
Oh, the inner critic.
Inner critic. I'd like to also create an adaptive counterpart to that, right? Because I'm all about being adaptive. So it could be something like the inner asset or the inner warrior, whatever that is. And so I like really that part too, and holding them together. And I think a lot of times we're stuck in pathology as therapists, CBT, this thing, and then let's work on the inner critic. But what about the inner warrior, right? The inner person that's, you had mentioned the word surviving to thriving. What is that part called? And being really curious and strengths based about that. I think I really love that in phase 2 resourcing when we're going through that. And I think it could be very critical to some of these treatment modalities to incorporate these other parts that are doing well. I know we treat a lot of pathology and we come at it from that worldview, which, it's a worldview, but I really like in my practice to also say, hey, and look at the positives and reframe that. So, when we look at those negative beliefs, a lot we work on CBT, and you come to EMDR and you're like, positive cognition. I have no positive cognitions, right? It's like, yes, you do. What were the ones that got you to be here in therapy? I can do it. I can trust. And so sometimes that takes a lot of more work in my experience of developing the PC and the, wiring that wires together, kind of enhancement in that network.
Oh, well, Bronwyn, I just, you ladies are sharing so many different golden nuggets, right? Especially for both the new and the seasoned clinicians, probably for the newer clinicians, they get introduced to these newer and more in-depth types of approaches of being able to support the clients that they're serving. And then for the seasoned one, I know for me, you really brought forth a pure spirit of validating some things, right? I loved how you talked about just being able to recognize how trauma can cause us, in other words, to lose that sense of touch with the self, and the self from maybe 6-year-old to 12-year-old, that sense of connection and well, I want to just use the sense of connection to those cells gets broken and it's severed or gets lost and buried beneath the pain of the traumas, right? And how we are able, the gift you gave me today, Bronwyn, is the fact that we are able to use these different therapy. Before I say this, I want to make it clear for those who are listening that EMDR in itself is not a tool or an intervention. It is a whole entire healing approach and pathway. But one of the tools within this therapy is that we get to integrate it with other therapy models like ego states, internal family systems in order to, it makes me feel like y'all, like we are like mental health body surgeons, right? And we have our little toolkit to sew up, to go in and clear out, some of the yuck, some of the pain, and then we get to stitch and help stitch our clients up so their wounds can heal. But one of the things you gave me is the fact that we are able to, first of all, through compassion, help our clients to recognize that they can rebuild a connection and a relationship with those parts that got lost and buried with the pain. And we can validate, and that there really is some gold dust. There's some gold. There's some good. There's some strengths in those parts, like you mentioned, a 6-year-old, and helping them to go there to unearth that, right? I think that to me, and for me, just was magical.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah,
Tamera. And thank you,
yeah.
Kathy. That's so beautiful. And Tamera, what you're saying is so true. And I think, Kathy, what you were saying at the end, and what we have to be a little careful at, because I often have people coming to me after they've been to many other therapists and they have complex trauma, but they have not felt understood by the other therapists. And so sometimes they're kind of making a comment where they felt like the other therapist was just like a cheerleader, right? And so I guess when we're working with parts and we're working with structural dissociation, we do want to get to those strengths, but we also have to honor that exile, that protector part of how much pain there has been there, and how awful and how much ick that part is sometimes still feeling. So it's like we don't want to jump over it. Like I've heard Gabor Mate talk about it, where we want to be able to honor the feelings but not get stuck in them, which can cause, maybe the depression, the anxiety, the addictions. But we also want to be able to feel them, and then we also want to start to reach towards the strength base. But when Kathy was talking about the positive cognitions, what I've learned often with complex trauma, instead of saying I am loved for the positive cognition, we'll just reach for I'm learning to feel loved. And we meet more in the middle, and then people are feeling more seen and more heard. And then what you were saying, Tamera, yes, often what I'm seeing after we get through all of the stages, what we sometimes are dealing with, and it might just be through talk therapy, of the grief of wow, the grief of all those lost. Wow, I didn't have the high school experience I was hoping for. I didn't have the college experience I was hoping for. I didn't have the 20s or 30s experience. Wow, I'm still 40 or 50 and I'm struggling to be an adult. And there's a lot of grief here, right? So once we kind of have built everything back up and we have everything back on board, we're kind of then feeling like we're able to now really grieve what it felt like to have complex trauma. And honestly, I'm starting to get to the point where I just say I resonate with it because it's easier for people to understand. But I'm starting to just be like, you know what? Let me release the title, and I just identify with being like a human being having a human experience, because this is that collective interconnectedness that we kind of all see. And when we bring the polyvagal theory into it, right, we've got like the three of us are in safe and social. We're connected. We're curious. We're collaborative. If a part were to get activated, we might fall down into the sympathetic place where now it's a story of comparison. It's a story of fear. And then if that happens for too long and we're not able to get back up here through co-regulation or through something I'm able to self-soothe, we fall into the bottom of the ladder, which is the dorsal vagal, and we're feeling sad, we're feeling disconnected, we're feeling lonely, right? And so often when we bring that compassion in and we bring parts work in, for example, this morning, I really wanted to go on a bike ride, but first, my first elderly dog needed help. Then my second elderly dog needed help. Then my husband wanted a hug, some cuddles. Then all of a sudden my son calls out and I'm like, my bike ride, right? And so right then and there, because I practice self-compassion so much, can I give myself and my parts, self-compassion? And can I then stay in a state of curiosity, which I was able to, and I still made it on my bike ride? Or do I fall down in that shame spiral, that coulda, shoulda, woulda, the inner critic? And if I get stuck there, then that's when we start to hear like, oh, my morning was horrible. I couldn't take my bike ride. And we kind of get into some of that learned helplessness, or some people identify still with the word victimhood mentality, right? And so the self-compassion is a daily thing. And if we're still on our journey and it's early on, then it might just be like I'm learning to give the self-compassion, or I might just be instead of the inner ally, maybe it's just a neutral voice that I'm reaching for.
Ooh, Bronwyn, you said some beautiful things. First of all, let me back the train up a little bit. Number one, I appreciate you sharing and your own personal experience and talking about the conversation you had with your son and how you kind of notice sometimes just wondering if other people think you got some inflated sense of worthiness, but how you're not concerned with what other people are thinking in regards to that, because you've done the work that you've needed to do. And you use the word healthy narcissism. The reason why I'm catching that and highlighting that is because there's so much on social media about the painful aspects of narcissism. And it is a breath of fresh air to hear someone talk about the healthy aspect, right? The healthy dose, okay, that I think sometimes is just, not talked about enough. The other thing that I wanted to share is how, and Kathy and I have been talking about moving out of just the titles and the identity that we get handed in the field or in the system, in the communities of the work we do, and going back to and embracing this spirit of being the healer and the human on the journey, but showing up in an ethical and professional way, right? To make that connection more human, to be with. There's a lot of times I've experienced this, that a lot of the times when client shame comes in, and the first thing I've wanted to do was rescue them out of it. No, don't do that. Don't feel that way. But what you're sharing and what you're offering and what I've learned is how to take that journey and allow them to arrive at their own place and a whole space for that shame, instead of trying to make it go away and all the things, right?
I think I wanted to kind of echo all of these things. I think one of the things we're talking about, and I'm personally learning, when I step into spaces where, like you're saying, I've done the work on these beliefs, and maybe I'm not in those spaces, or I'm new to those spaces, or I haven't been there for a while. And then I do this work, which includes bike rides and meditation and all these things for myself, because I love bikes. I just bought one, a little cruiser, right? And so I traded my motorcycle for a bicycle. And when I had my twins, I sold my motorcycle because I couldn't inside of myself say, I can ride this motorcycle. If something happens, I can, that sense of responsibility. I thought, I can't do that. So I traded it for a bicycle, which I just recently bought. Gives me joy. But the point is, those are people in my world, right? But those aren't the people that get me, right? I'm in their world. Those are just people in my world. And those are not the people that fill me up. But sometimes we do have to be in those spaces to where the comparison that you're talking about, or the feeling that people get as sort of this self-affirming place, when you step in that light, and Tamera experienced this in the cab. She has a beautiful story about this, where you step into a space where someone's not healed, and there's no judgment with not healed, but they haven't done the same work. They look at you, and it's like, what is that about? How do I get there? You know, and I have seen that in a supervisor of like, I really want this skill that this person has. How do I get there? And now I'm sort of experiencing I am that skilled person that can lead. And so for me, that's a little new experience to where I can lead now from that place. I've been thinking this week about leadership. And when you think about leadership, you know, I've been in all kinds of organizations, institutions, faculty, all these things. And it's like the leadership is connecting with people and connecting with those spaces. And I would encourage, you know, as a private practice owner or those kinds of things, what kind of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be the controlling, you know, micromanager, which I've been? Or do you, and now I can say, no, I can trust the universe. I can trust the process. And you don't want to disenfranchise the people that you're there for. And so Chelsea Sullenberger in his book on leadership, Making a Difference, talks about these various stories of these various leaders and encouraging what type of leader do you want to be. But I sometimes think I'm in spaces where either people may not get, you know, why is she not responding to the drama? It's like, I've done that. I've been there, done that. And it lowers my energy, right? So I've been able to go inside of myself and say, is this for my highest good? It might you do that, but for me, when I leave and I feel deflated and deactivated in my body, right here, it resides right in my chest. When I'm feeling closed right there, I'm not my open full self. I know that there might be something there. So I'm really learning my own intuition, and that's what I mean by my work in those kinds of contexts. So a lot of stuff there, but just a real extension of appreciation to you for bringing that concept forward.
That's so beautiful, Kathy. I'm like, I want to work for you. You said and you know, for any parents out there, so my son will be 7 on September 1st. And I think for any parents out there, that shift from manager to more of coach or guide is the same thing in parenting that you're talking about, right? And that's really the shift you're talking about is being in ventral vagal, safe and social. I trust the process, I trust the universe, you know, the universe or God has my back or whatever people orientate to, versus I'm in fear. And there's that hypervigilance. And with complex trauma, the brain, right, already has a negative bias, and then it's scanning and it scans and it shows you, and the inner critic can kind of show you, and this time, and this time, and this time, there was a problem, there was a mistake. And so if I don't control, right, then there's going to be a problem, a mistake instead. And then I think sometimes on the adaptive side, we say, you know what? We know in business and private practice and adulting and in parenting, life is messy. There will be mishaps, there will be mistakes, there will be things to kind of clean up. But I feel that empowerment and that confidence that I can handle it, right? Versus kind of some of that imposter syndrome that I know, like, unfortunately, I just say unfortunately because I know it's very painful. I went through it when I first started practicing, and I know a lot of new therapists and even very seasoned therapists can still feel it. And I think that goes back to what Tamera was saying, which was so beautiful. And what I used to be so drained when I left my community clinic jobs. But when I saw I'm not responsible for your pain, I'm not responsible for overdoing it, for rescuing you. I'm more of a guide. That shift really changes the energy. But I think also, Tamera, I think if there are younger clinicians or even seasoned clinicians that are feeling it, we say name it to tame it. And I feel like one of the things that I've been very successful with my clients is my authenticity. So I can even say to them, wow, a part of me is really wanting to run and rescue you right now, but I know I can't. Right. And even just saying that instead of just leaving it hanging, because the thing about the polyvagal theory and our nervous system, we can feel things, right, that we can't even sometimes, like the neuroception, we can feel that competition, we can feel the joy, we can feel, often therapists can feel all of these other things because that seems to be like our spidey sense and one of the reasons why we come into therapy. So I think it's sometimes beautiful to like name it, but then say, yeah, we can't do that. So what can we do with this?
Ooh, Bronwyn. Oh my gosh.
Wow, it's amazing, right?
You are a pure cup of, what is the word?
It's like honey tea. It's like going
Yeah,
down.
it's something like,
Oh.
and so let me say this. Hold on, let me catch my breath. I'm so serious because what you're doing right now for me is your voice is confirming the what I call divine messages that have been coming to me about my own journey as a therapist. And so one of the things you're mentioning is, it really is just an invitation for us to be here now and to embrace. I just did a live spontaneously yesterday to tell us, whether we're clients, potential clients, or clinicians on the journey, or whatever profession we are, to recognize healing and growth has ebbs and flows. It is, and I know it can be cliche, right? That it's not linear, but if we could just be here now, even if it means we rewind our own tape to look back over our life and recognize, you know, we have what we have is the capacity to choose how we're going to react or respond. And that's the journey. I invite myself and clients, and you just have no idea what you've given me today, and hopefully other therapists who come across this, just a beautiful expression of how to journey through, not just
Yeah.
as a therapist, but as a human and as a healer with other human beings, and validating. Okay, validating yourself rather than think you got to hide and tuck stuff away, because that is what people who have not just complex trauma, but all the forms of trauma, what they really need is a human being who is here now.
Empathetic witness. Mhm.
Yeah, I think what you were talking about in this field of competition, even as a new clinician, cheer mom, all these things where you're actually supposed to compete, and I'm more of the woman's woman. I'm not here for that. This is my primary purpose. I think for the new clinician is just trusting your skills, figuring out what your primary purpose is, what is your true north, right, in your center, and just allowing yourself a way to take that process. And it's just amazing how you get to that place. It takes some time. So again, what you were saying, Brahman, with the self-compassion, it'll take some time, but you'll get there, right? And it's like, oh, it's not a race, and then when that comes forward and it's like, it is a race, and it's just like, people don't get the other side sometimes. Like, it's not, and I can just sit with that and be here. You're like, what?
And before we move forward, because I know we're going to have to surrender you soon to your Friday, Bronwyn. I loved how natural and organic you moved through the idea of polyvagal theory. Can you share with us, what has learning and integrating polyvagal theory into your practice, how has that been a game changer for you?
Well, I think what you had mentioned, where we have a choice on how we respond and what we do, the polyvagal theory really just informs us that we can befriend our nervous system. And if we can befriend our nervous system, wow, and so I think my favorite thing, I was just going to show this, the polyvagal flip chart by Deb Dana. In here, in here at the end is one of my favorite things that I will photocopy and give to my clients. It's the regulating resources map. It has each state, right? And then it says things I can do on my own and things I can do with others. And one of my favorite things has been actually including the polyvagal with my couples clients, And so I'll encourage both of them to maybe fill this out, have a picture of the little me's, if they can, and put it on the refrigerator. Because what we know about this is it gives us so much empowerment. And my favorite example is like, say I'm feeling a bit down. And so I know, I notice, what state am I in? Oh, I'm in dorsal vagal. I'm in shutdown. Okay. Everyone goes through this. You don't have to be depressed to get down to there, and like, okay, what's going to make me feel better? Okay. Well, I know if I go and lay in my bed and doom scroll on, Instagram for half hour, and it was not really doom scrolling, but like, I'm not looking at baby animal videos or therapy videos. Who knows? All of a sudden the algorithm turns dark, and I'm looking and they're showing me, who knows, food prep for the apocalypse, right? And I stay there for 30 minutes. I'm going to stay in shutdown. But I know, so if I have enough energy, I would go on a bike ride or a walk. Then I'm probably going to get into fight or flight. Then I can get into ventral vagal from there, safe and social. If I'm pretty collapsed, I'll just go sit in my Florida room and look out the window and look at the greenery. And that's going to be enough to start to bring me up. Maybe then I can reach for a book and start reading some books. And then maybe from there, I can go make myself, a cup of tea, or maybe drink some seltzer water, or right. Then from there, maybe I'll listen to a podcast that uplifts me. And now I'm back up here. But all of this takes intention and awareness. I hear from a lot of people that it doesn't feel this easy, and that makes sense. So listen, if you do have complex trauma, if you do have depression, if you do have anxiety, that's what us professionals are for. And that's where I think, that's where expert help is for. And for people that are first starting to learn to work with complex trauma and dissociation, right? Dissociation and we're talking about DID. We would say more than one part is in charge of everyday life. And I would not recommend anyone that's a beginner to work with DID. And then we say, hey, besides getting the consultation, besides getting the help, I want to, do the DES, see what kind of dissociation there is, or you could think about doing something more intensive like the mid. But for some people who have dissociation, we might just say like, hey, I can ask some of these questions verbally. And like we were talking, that human to human connection and not pathologizing, that can also go a long way. But yeah, I think that to know that with intention, we can befriend our nervous system is so powerful.
Just beautiful, man, have you been a full cup of delight and very enlightening and just beautiful conversation, I want to ask you this too before we, have to pause this beautiful conversation that hopefully we'll be able to have you come back. You said so many different incredible things today. It was like, oh my gosh, wow. How important would you say compassion is for both the clients we serve and also for us as the therapists?
Yeah, well, I think it's probably number one. I love what Kathy was saying, that once you do the work and you almost have this glow about you, it's, and people, kind of joke with me like, oh, what's the anti-aging? But like, if I were to say any anti-aging, the first thing is the self-love. It's that self-compassion. Like my goal and what my husband, but I was, often do it with my son. We talk about the cord of love, and that's really that attachment. So we say the cord of love from our hearts to each other can be our hearts to God. And then we're sending that love from our hearts to our immediate family. And then we're sending that care and compassion or that love to our friends, to our family. And then we picture sending it to our community. Oh, I'm getting fireworks. To our community, to the state of Florida, the United States of America, to the world, and to the cosmos, like sending that all out. So I feel like that's also just something that if it's, someone that has, I'm very creative. So someone that thinks creatively, that's another way to think about it. And that really grounds us in that interconnectedness. We're all here. And that's what I think I really love our conversation so much, because it is so powerful to be in these three different states, not even be in the same room, but I feel so connected to you guys. I could talk to you for hours.
What I think is important about your story is that you waited. You've been wanting to be on a podcast, and then you waited till it aligned, you were very patient. So I think that's brilliant. I commend you for that. I think that's practice, right? I think it's also the important thing that I'm doing is we're sending things out, and if you're watching the video, you saw the fireworks. We really need to return that back to ourselves, and those steps you listed from dorsal to ventral can do that. But I really, it's okay to receive. And I think we need to have those inputs, right?
So incredible. This has been an amazing conversation. The beautiful thing is that in my experience with you today, Bronwyn, you gave us so many different gentle reminders. It almost felt like a helicopter or eagle's view, right? Coming to this top of this mountain to look down and take a really good look at the therapy work we do and look at how we can approach it from a different perspective. And that way we can show up, right? That's my passion. My passion now in doing my own work is to be here now and to, if I can borrow this, not care, not apologize, because I have done my work to have the birthright to take up space now in my book, to where I'm not seeking that permission or that validation. And so it really is a beautiful thing. But I thank you for coming into this community today and sharing on first polyvagal theory, because I do believe as EMDR clinicians that it will give us that deeper roadmap that can guide us, okay, in helping us to understand where is our client, locate where they are and what part of the brain, where are they at, so that we can be with them from that space. And then the principle of compassion and just holding space, not just for the people we serve, but for our family. You talked about that, and for ourselves. And so I want to share that if you are wanting to connect with Bronwyn, you can find her on Instagram at Bronwyn. And please forgive me, Bronwyn, how do you pronounce your last name?
It's Bronwyn Heiss _therapy.
Okay, I thought so, but I didn't want to butcher it. Okay, and so you can find her there on her Instagram and connect with her, or her therapy website is bronwynheisstherapy.com. Make me wish I was in Florida so I could come to your practice and get some really good work and healing and growth and all the things, okay? And so I want to hold space for you, Bronwyn, if you have any last words, and then we're going to toss this hot mic over to Kathy. Any last words that you would like to leave and spread that love of light out?
No, it was just such a pleasure being on this podcast with the two of you guys. I can feel your joyous energy, your passion for EMDR. And, when we first got on the call before we even started recording, I was like, I can feel your passion for EMDR. And I just think honestly, I turned 44 in June, and I just think it's such an exciting age coming into my 40s. It's just been such an amazing journey. And it's like you said, that unapologetically me. But I feel like as women, if you do identify as a woman, there's been such this history of competition, of fear, of hypervigilance. And I think the more that we get together and we support each other, I feel this humongous shift, you don't have to be women. We can just be human beings, but there's this historical competition between people who identify as women. And the more that we get together and we uplift each other, we support each other. Kathy has something unique. You have something unique. I have something unique. We don't have to compete at all. The more we get together and we support each other, we are building something so amazing. And I think I'm just so happy to be a part of that today. I think this is a beautiful example of that, of when we can really get together, collaborate, support. It just turns out amazing.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, right there. I mean, that's what it's been about, is just that. So I appreciate that recognition, those comments, because that was, I can't say anything else there. You said it.
Thank you, guys. This has been so beautiful. I'd love to be on again. We should come up with a little series.
Yeah, we should. We could do
should.
Polyvagal 101. Talk about the.
We should.
You? Okay, that's
Okay.
good.
So
Okay, well,
Kathy, go ahead and take us out.
First of all, you are a magnificent human. You glow inside and out, and we are just thrilled to be light workers, you know, in the triangle from south. You know, y'all are in the south, I'm in the north, and just all over the US today. So that's amazing. I am Kathy Couch. We offer trainings in grief, death, dying, and bereavement, documentation. We do our podcast, our free monthly huddle. All sorts of things at Rewire 360, where we have our EMDR University, where we companion EMDR therapists to be certified and approved consultants and trainers. So we are so excited to have everyone here. Wishing you a happy Friday, and just stay tuned for our next guest. And we are so thrilled to have our time shared with you today. You can now see all of our podcast live in the Rewired 360 EMDR University group, and you can comment live with our guests. So that's amazing.
Have an incredible weekend, ladies.
Okay, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.